It's time now for Korea Book Club, our weekly dive into the world of Korean literature and books through works available in English translations and in Korean as well. Joining us this week, we have with us a cultural essayist Colin Marshall, host of the podcast Korean 한국, and author of the essay collection 한국 요약 금지. Colin, it's great to see you.
Glad to be back in the studio.
And understand that we'll be seeing more of you as well. You'll be easing the load on our other literary critic, Barry Welsh, and stopping by every other week, right?
I'll do my best.
Yes, we appreciate it.
It's more reading, but that can be enjoyable, as you know.
Yes, we appreciate all the extra work that you're doing for us, and we look forward to more of what you'll be bringing for us each week.
Thank you.
Let's look at what you have for us today. I understand it is another book as yet untranslated book.
That's right. This is a Korean novel that's practically fresh off the presses, having been published just a couple of months ago. It is 반짝반짝 샛별야학 by Choi Hana.
Okay, let's discuss the title first. 반짝반짝 샛별야학. I guess 반짝반짝 can be twinkle, twinkle,
Twinkle, twinkle, like the song? Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, twinkle,
반짝반짝 작은 별.
Morningstar night school? Well,
sure. Okay, so exactly. So 샛별야학. Yahak as in night school, right?
Exactly, yeah, night school. And in this particular case, it's a night school attended by elderly women. And that may not sound like the most immediately compelling subject for a novel, I grant you. But I always bear in mind that what makes a story interesting, no matter the medium, isn't what it's about, but how it's about it. And it comes through in the telling that Choi Hana, this novel's author, clearly has a genuine fascination for her characters and the reasons they've chosen to get an education fairly late in life.
Well, I do think that's actually rather compelling. We have heard of such stories in the news in Korea in recent years of elderly men and women getting an education late in life because they didn't have such opportunities growing up in Korea at the time.
Indeed, indeed. Sometimes even learning to read.
Exactly, exactly. So, 샛별야학, 샛별 night school, should we say? Or as you said,
Sure.
Morningstar night school, maybe something like that. What sort of education are they getting here then? What are they learning at this 샛별야학?
Technically, they're enrolled in middle school, or junior high school, as it's called in some parts of the world. What do they say in England?
Yes, I guess it would be middle school.
Middle school. Okay. Middle school, junior high, wherever you're from in the English-speaking world, you'll understand. The protagonist of this novel, 68-year-old Hengja, she grew up so busy taking care of her younger siblings, this was the era of large families, that she never managed to get beyond elementary school herself. And with her, the other students at the night school, Sonyo, Sunja, and Shiot, all shared the experience, which was hardly unknown in their generation, of difficulties and obligations mounting up early enough in life to deny them the chance for a full education.
Right, the names are quite interesting, I think. Hengja, Sonyo, Sunja. They're all other old-sounding names, should we say, for anyone familiar with Korean names.
Yes, indeed.
And they do evoke an image of women of a certain age, shall we say. I think one name stands out, though. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone named Shiot before, right? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Right. These are names mostly that are generationally associated. As you know, many names in Korea, they reflect the generation of the person who has the name.
Sure.
You hear that ja or that nyo at the end, you can say, oh, this is a woman over 60, 70 years old, perhaps. Shiot, though, is not a common name by any means. It brings to mind the letter of the Korean alphabet, the Hangul character, Shiot.
Yeah, Shiot,
but
yeah.
It's not her name. Her name is not just that character. It's actually spelled out Shiot, spelled out in two syllables, like an ordinary name. But in a sense, it might just as well be the one letter. Choi Hana, the author, has spoken elsewhere about how their choice to name this character, Shiot, underscores the fact that 60, 70 years ago, the preference for sons over daughters here in Korea was still strong enough that sometimes families wouldn't even take much care in naming a girl, much less ensuring that she received an education.
I see. So it's another reminder, I guess, then of the patriarchal nature of Korean society, particularly in the past. You mentioned that in the past as well, there was a strong preference for sons over daughters in Korea, like many places. But in recent decades, of course, we've seen a gradual shift away from that here in Korea. I guess that's just one of many changes Korean society has undergone in that time. And it seems the novel presents these women as having been shaped by a very different Korea than the one we know today.
It does, in some ways, Korea difficult to recognize, but actually these characters themselves are recognizable from real life today in Korea, I would say. And it's not so much that they're based on real people, though in the author's note, Choi Hana does admit to having been inspired by the life of one of her aunts in making the character Haengja, but that their archetype, if you like, remains highly visible in Korean society. And that archetype is, of course, the halmoni, or grandmother. And in fact, the narration of this novel emphasizes that by referring to Haengja always as Haengja halmoni. And you may remember how, a few years ago, the actress Yoon Yo-jung became famous in the West after her Oscar-winning performance as the grandmother of an immigrant family in Lee Isaac-chung's film Minari. For a while there, fans were even referring to her as the definitive K-halme, or K-grandma. So thoroughly did she embody a figure that's been so much a part of Korean lives, both here in Korea and abroad.
Indeed. Then do you think perhaps the Western grandmother tropes and the Korean grandmother tropes are different character types then?
They share qualities but also have big differences. And as far as I've seen in Western films, novels, and television series, and I've seen a fair few of them, grandmothers tend to be portrayed as benevolent founts of folksy wisdom, sometimes stern, sometimes a little bit dotty. The Korean grandmother has that side as well, of course, as a character, but also a kind of untamable irascibility, if you like, a trait perhaps cultivated by having survived difficult periods of Korean history with few resources at hand. And the novel depicts Haengja as possessed of all the intelligence and adeptness she needs to get by in life, but it also describes her lack of formal education as a source of Han.
Okay, so Han, that's should we say, a grand concept that you've brought up. It'll be familiar to, I think, a lot of people who have been interested in Korean literature and culture for a long time. But how would you explain it to someone who's never heard it before?
In a way, I was surprised to see Han referenced in this context, since I've long considered it one of those emotions, like the deep bonds of Jong or the collective joy of Hung, that most often evoke to explain Korea to foreigners. And when asked about Han myself by other foreigners who don't know Korea very well, I usually say that it refers to bitter, resentful personal feelings inflicted by the country's history. That, I think, is key to the concept. It's felt at the individual level, Han, but it originates at the national one. And the most commonly cited source of Han is, of course, the division of the peninsula into North and South Korea after the Second World War. But in Haengja's case, it comes more directly from the privations of growing up in the aftermath of the Korean War, when North and South alike were struggling.
Right. It's this sort of, I would say, cultural, generational feeling of resentment, but also sadness, specific to Korea, I would say. Very intangible, but at the same time, almost ever-present feeling or aura for a lot of people, especially in the 20th century here in Korea.
Yes.
So with that context then, let's go back to these quote-unquote middle schoolers in modern-day Korea that this story is set in. They are studying from a typical middle school curriculum, I believe, and the history they are studying in the history class. I guess it might seem like a distant era for actual middle schoolers, but for these women in the novel, they've lived through it.
Exactly. If you're 12 years old today, it's a very different thing than if you're 68. So there's one particularly memorable chapter. In one chapter, I should say, the night school class goes on a field trip to Incheon's 수도국산 달동네 박물관, or Sudoguksan Museum of Housing and Living in English. It's a real museum. Its exhibits reconstruct life as it was once lived in Daldongne, or moon villages, the poor hilltop neighborhoods, almost all of which have by now been razed for redevelopment in cities across Korea. Now, to the kind of 12-year-old student I mentioned today, who would have been born in, 2012, this would offer a vivid glimpse of the olden days, very distant olden days. But when Haengja, Sonyo, Sunja, and Shiol visit, the experience takes them back to the prime of their lives in the 1970s and 80s. And that's just one of the 반짝반짝 샛별야학, one of the ways 반짝반짝 샛별야학 illustrates these unconventional students' reaction to conventional educational material. We also get a few chapters involving their lessons in English, a language that none of them have had the chance to study properly before. And Choi Hana, who has taught English professionally herself, seems to have brought her personal experience to these episodes, and she imbues them with both comedy and high dramatic stakes at times.
Sure. I mean, it's another representation of how much Korea has changed since the Korean War, the economic changes that Korea has gone through, each generation have experienced so many different things that is once again represented in this story as well. And they sound like great stories here, almost like anecdotes. But I take it that there's more going on in this novel than just old ladies going back to school.
It's true. There's more. This is a... How to put it? It's a novel written by an author, Choi Hana, who has an interest in genre fiction. And if you write genre fiction, her last novel, I believe, was a Gangnam real estate murder mystery. So she has an interest in Korean society and how it works and how it's developed, but also in having a plot that moves forward. And so in this case, in the case of this novel, there is, of course, the big question of whether these women will be able to pass their final exams and receive their middle school diplomas, without which, in an education-obsessed society like Korea, it's easy to feel a certain lack within oneself that they've long been trying to repair. In Hengja's case alone, the studying isn't made any easier by other troubles that arise while she looks after her young granddaughter and her own nonagenarian father. So she's got multiple generations to watch over herself. A situation more than several Korean grandmothers are in, probably thousands of them. At the same time, the very future of the 샛별야학, or the 샛별 night school, also falls into jeopardy. One of the problems is financial. Its administration rejects the idea of charging fees, knowing that their elderly students are only willing to spend money on their family members, never on themselves. An inclination, a sacrificial inclination, that will be familiar to anyone who spent much time with a genuine K-grandma.
Indeed, I'm sure that will sound familiar to many Koreans. Well, Colin, it sounds like a heartwarming, amusing, but also a moving book. I feel it would work especially well for Korean readers who will be able to directly connect with the stories, as it will, I think, evoke memories of their own grandmothers and other elderly family members and neighbours. Do you think this is a work that could work for international readers as well, if it were to be translated?
Yes, I think if the book were to be translated or even adapted into a drama or movie, it seems the possibilities seem many and varied there. It would give more foreign readers a chance to get to know the personality of the talked-about K-grandma, and to understand that, no matter the age of the student, some of the pleasures and agonies and squabbles that erupt in the classroom are truly universal. And for Hengja, Sonyo, Sunja, and Shiot, returning to school in their 60s and 70s comes with certain difficulties, but there is one advantage they have over regular middle schoolers. They enjoy the occasional cup of makgeolli, which, at least for me, is certainly relatable enough.
Right, makgeolli being, of course, the traditional rice wine in Korea. Yes, I'm not sure I would survive going back to school without the occasional drink to take the edge off as well.
It's a study aid for them, anyway.
Exactly.
It would be for me.
Well, perhaps the stories and the characters are charming enough, I think, to work for an international audience. And I think you mentioned there perhaps it could be adapted into a drama. Maybe I think that would work very well as well. But for now, it is only available in Korean as a novel. Once again, it's called 반짝반짝, 샛별야학 by Choi Hana, and that was our pick for this week's Korea Book Club. Colin, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you once again for that recommendation, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Thanks for having me, Jang-ho.
And that brings us to the end of another show. We'll be back same time tomorrow. So do join us again then to continue to get the latest news updates, analysis of key headlines from Korea. Till then, we hope you have a great day. I've been your host, Kwon Jang-ho, and thank you as always for listening. Goodbye.